How's everyone going? This is Classic Amateurs. My name is Raz, and I'm here with Norman.
Hello, everyone.
What were your thoughts tonight?
My thoughts tonight are centered around a little girl, and let me explain.
Okay.
We are going to talk about Lolita by Vladimir Nabukov. For those who are not familiar with the book, Lolita is essentially an adventure book for a pedophile. So it's centered. Yeah. What do you know about this book?
Disclaimer. I obviously haven't read the book. Just like any other book that you're presenting, it's actually super interesting because I have not read the book, so I'm really interested to hear your take on it. I have seen the movie. I assume it's 1997 with Jeremy Irons, I believe. And it's the type of movie I was probably 10 or 12 is the type of movie that you saw in the evening when your parents were busy doing something else, and I only saw glimpses of, and I knew there was something wrong about that movie, and I've never actually spent the whole time watching it through because I always felt guilty about it. I knew it, I think when I was 12, that there was something really wrong in that narrative.
Yeah.
And I've never come to terms with that. So it's great that we're talking about that.
I think there are many people who didn't come in terms with the book or the movie or the story in general. There was actually 2 movie adaptations of this, one that you mentioned, and then there was an earlier one with Stanley Kubrick because of its popularity, but they actually aged the characters. Because in the book, she is 12 years old, but in the movie, I think she's 17, at least in the Stanley Kubrick one. And like generally, the book is an exercise in language where the main character, the narrator, the named pedophile named Humber, really weird name. Humpy Dumpty is, introducing you to his adventures with the 12-year-old Lolita. He often refers to as the nymphette. The nymphette just means like a young child that's kind of like becoming womanly. And their adventures are what we read about in the book. Obviously, these are not adventures like the Indiana Jones adventures. It's more like adventures of love and adventures of conflicts and all around the clock. So,
by the way,
yeah,
can I just call out how controversial this topic is now, given the Russia-Ukraine situation? Apparently, some people have an issue with covering Russian authors these days, and there's kind of a cancel culture around even talking about Russian authors. I know he's not entirely Russian, but he's Russian-American.
Yeah, correct.
Is that
correct.
True?
Yeah, he's Russian-American, and apparently we are not participating in this cancel culture, so please don't cancel us.
Which I'm actually very, very happy about. I think any restriction of freedom of speech or cultural cancellation is really not the way to go. And we all hope for peace. Okay. Well, do you want to talk about, do you want to tell me more about the author? Because that's an interesting, first of all, he's American-Russian, right? Or did you want to go straight into the topic?
I'll go straight
about
into
statutory rape, or is it called ephebophilia if it's a in puberty, if a person is attracted to someone at that puberty stage already? So it's not exactly pedophilia, which is really children before the age of puberty.
I guess so,
anyway, it's
but
just a detail.
The running joke is that
relevant?
No. The running joke is that when you try to explain the difference between pedophilia and ephebophilia, whatever you mentioned, people will quickly assume that you are trying to defend pedophilia. So I'd rather not go into it. The topic is
a non-debate.
The topic is a bit more nuanced here. We are not dwelling on definitions too much, but rather than we are talking about an unreliable narrator, because one of the reasons Lolita became such a massive hit and very important story is because it's one of the few books that introduced unreliable narrators. Do you know anything about unreliable narrators or have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I was always a bit fascinated with Joyce and stream of consciousness. I don't know if that's exactly it, but I'd hypothesize that it has some roots in the fact that as opposed to the classical novel of the realism or right of Balzac and so on, where they're trying to portray things as real as possible. You're dealing with the human psyche, which has its own stream of visions, and to your point, may even go down as you cannot trust basically what it produces, or it's a very, very narrow and subjective view of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And that can be at conflict with the reality as described by a consensus, right, of other people from the outside, that what that would mean effectively. And I can hypothesize to the point of a conflict of this magnitude of statutory rape.
Yeah, so I want to like sum it up in a much quicker way. Unreliable narrator is when the story that you are being told is not the story that's actually happening, right? So a famous example from movies is Fight Club, where you have the story going forward, and in the end, it's revealed that something completely different happened, right? So it is kind of like.
Oh, I just remember the book that was on that theme. I think I've read The Collector. I don't remember who wrote it. I have a lapsus now. But Collector basically is this book that is divided in two. It's basically the serial killer, the one that captures the victim and their perspective, and then you in the second half of the novel you get the victim's perspective on exactly the same events.
Yeah,
and it is crushing.
Yeah, it's a very good creative device. There are plenty of good movies across different genres that use it, as well as books. So Life of Pi is a good example, as well as Gone Girl. There are plenty of books that use unreliable narrators, and it's a lot of fun. It's quite a modern take. What you said is actually accurate, but I want to distill it into a much simpler form, which is that what the narrator, what the storyteller tells you is not exactly what happens. And the point of the book, the reason why this book became so influential is because the main character admits that he is the bad guy. He admits that he is a pedophile, but at the same time, he paints himself as the good guy oftentimes, to the point where you start to feel sympathetic towards him. He puts himself into a situation where most things do not happen because of him, but happens outside of him, and he just kind of like
happened to him.
It just happens, right? So one of the common criticisms that come up is that he states that in the book, at least, the little girl is the one that initiates the relationships, right? So the little girl that hits on him rather than the other way around. And then a lot of the descriptions, a lot of their adventures together is described like they would be a normal couple. And then you have moments in the book when he reveals a much more insidious part of the relationship, like the part where he just casually remarks how this little girl, named Lolita, cries after each, moment they are together, or how she is showing withdrawal, which he just claims to be childish stubbornness, but many people argue it is like a traumatic response to abuse. So
right.
and this is helped by a lot other characters as well. So you have the child's mother, who is very manic and very like emotional, as well as another pedophile who is like the, I guess, bad guy pedophile. I guess every pedophile is a bad guy, but he's like the super evil caricature of a pedophile, while the main character, Umber, is like the good guy pedophile, quote unquote, right. Good guy pedophile. And it's all positioned and for the narrative is put together in very clever ways to show that our main character, the main pedophile, is actually good, and it's not his fault. Nothing that he's doing is doing out of malice or anything. And there are some very interesting moments there, like the discussion around what happens between them when Lolita grows up and actually gets older, and how he feels about that, and just generally like what exactly happens in a pedophile's mind once he achieves what he actually wanted. And I guess that's the reason why this book is incredibly popular, as well as incredibly nuanced and discussed.
And controversial.
Controversial, yeah. The book actually doesn't have a very exciting end. In the end of the day, the guy gets caught, right? And the relationship break up. But the way he thinks about his demise and his punishment is very interesting, because unlike what we would expect a pedophile saying, "Oh, I'm a good guy," whatever, he actually admits that he is the bad person. But he often puts himself as a victim of circumstances rather than someone who had an active role in making those bad things happen, right? So I guess that's really it, right? There's a few interesting things I read about Lolita when I was researching it. For example, a Texas town named Lolita was very upset at the book when it came out. They are a small religious community, so you can imagine how crazy things got very quickly. They almost changed their name, but they have not in the end, so they are still called Lolita.
I mean, that's why I'm actually really interested in one point you touched upon, the nuance around the age of the girl and the fact that visually, I mean, obviously, first of all, call out, you can bear a lot more in a book reading it than seeing it. I've noticed this. And so, for instance, I know people, including myself, right? You can bear the horror, for instance, of a thrilling scene or a horror scene a lot more while you're reading it and imagining it yourself, because you feel you have more control than if you were to be exposed to it visually in a movie. And I guess that's maybe related to this kind of the episode of this relationship between the two. I was also wondering whether once you raise the age of the girl to 17 as opposed to 12, that clear divide, right, clear wrong disappears. So the movie ends up being about something else, because it's a lot more difficult and ambiguous at 17 than it is at 12. I don't know if we want to go into that, but I'm just calling it out. There's a big difference between 12 and 17. And I think it's no longer so much about the guy just being completely wrong, but about that tension about what is effectively sort of maturity in terms of making judgments around the topic. That's how I was perceiving it when I was seeing the movie, between a teenager and an adult person. And I actually thought that the what was really wrong about it was the fact that it was the stepfather. That, to me, that was always the thing that bothered me the most. The fact that he had come into this family and became a stepfather, and then it got entangled with this girl. That this archetype of the stepfather, which we see as a trope everywhere right now, right? There's something. There's something.
What
about
are you
that.
doing, stepfather?
Exactly, right. So why are we attracted so much, or why is this archetype of stepfather so interesting to us? What is it about it? Because I remember we had Snow White the other time when we talked about it. I talked about the archetype of the stepmother, what it means. But here we are talking about the archetype of the stepfather. Beside the fact that it was very well written and it puts you in the mind of a person that is clearly doing wrong things, it's an avatar for yourself to be doing all these bad things, yet still kind of feeling comfortable with that. And it's an exploration into that. What else was it about this whole being kind of the stepfather archetype? Did you find fascinating or interesting? What is it about it?
Well,
I don't know. If you don't know the answer, I don't know the answer myself. I don't know. There's something about it.
Well, in the book, the way it's described is that Umber is suffering from attraction to these young girls from very early age. And he actually ties it with like another girl that he was in love with when he was young and then died. And he kind of explains it as the trauma that caused actually made him a pedophile. And he is struggling with his attraction to little girls, and he tries to cure himself by marrying older women. So I think he has several wives, but he keeps divorcing them because it's not working out. So the reason why he becomes Lolita's stepfather is because he wants to get close to her. And the only way he can really get close to her is by, courting the mom and marrying the mom. So I don't think there's anything beyond this in the book. But I understand, like, nowadays the whole stepfather, stepbro, that sort of stuff became a bit of a meme as well as a device. As for why stepfather and not just father is, I think, probably the same reason as Snow White, sometimes not biological, but stepmother, right? Because the idea that a mother abuses her own child or a father abuses his own child is so reprehensible that most of society cannot handle it. I think I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and she was saying that, and this is probably applicable to the US mostly, but I don't know, maybe it works for other countries as well, is when a father abuses a child, sometimes the mother gets longer sentence because she enabled the abuse than the actual abuser, because that's how deeply rooted it is in society. And I think to an extent it applies to the dad as well. Like, I know it's a bit contradictory, but I think maybe the dad is like one stage divorced from this, or one step away from this, but still.
Why did people want to read it? Why would you read it now? Anyway, is it still readable? Is it still?
Yeah, it is. It is pretty easy to read. It's not a long story either. I know that when I read about the release of the novel, a lot of publishing houses have turned it down, thinking that it's quote unquote jailbait. Many people express that they will go to jail if they release this book. But then in the end, I'm not really sure who, but they released it. I think it's just interesting. I'm not really sure how it fits into those 50s conservative society. I'm not sure why people tolerated it, but they did. And to be honest, I think when it comes to this topic specifically, today we are probably way more black and white about it. Like, if you think about discussion, especially with cases like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff that came out a few years ago. Was it a few years ago? A few years ago, I guess.
Yeah.
And time flies, huh? And so with these, it just became very, very black and white. Back then, it was a lot of people probably looked at it as like a psychological study of someone who is a pedophile, and they could look at just like American Psycho, for example, looks into someone.
And they could bear the ambiguity that, look, obviously, I don't approve with this, but I can still experience that, right, as an avatar, be on that journey and understand what's happening without necessarily approving of it, right? It's kind of empathy versus sympathy.
I mean, not everyone.
More
not everyone handled it.
Well, clearly, but the appeal of the book is in this this experience, right, that you're having, right, within a character, a narrative voice that is clearly reprehensible ultimately, but you're still going on that journey, and it's a bit like a roller coaster in that sense, right, where you're clearly doing something against your instincts, but you're still going along for the thrill of being in something. It's different, and it's going to end at the end. It's not real, but there's something about going through that journey that is worthwhile because you are learning something.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you have to ask yourself, like, what books are you trying to read? Are you trying to only read books where you agree with the characters that are in the book, or are you trying to explore ideas and different situations? And the answer is never going to be a straight yes or straight no, right? It's going to be, everyone will have a different tolerance to it. And I guess this topic, looking into the head of a pedophile, is probably an extreme case of, if you are someone that says, hey, I don't want to read this because I don't feel comfortable with it, I'll totally understand, right?
Just, again, I think this is a mistake, and also the beauty of literature in a way, because you're often tempted to put an equal sign between the author, the narrator, and yourself as a reader going through that. And this is just proving that it's not the same person, right? The fact that Nabukov wrote this doesn't mean that he agrees with this, and doesn't make him a bad person for putting this down. Yeah. Although people would be easily sort of believing that would be the case.
Yeah.
That the fact that he's even thinking thoughts of the thoughts of these things make you necessarily a bad person, and I think that's That really raises the question in our society: where do you draw the line ethically? I mean, are you even allowed to think
Yeah.
something else, to explore an idea that you know is wrong, yet still keep it in your head and explore it to its ultimate consequences, which is what this book does effectively.
Yeah,
It
ultimately,
plays out something.
yeah, ultimately you want to divorce the author from his work, just because he, writes a character that's really bad doesn't mean he's endorsing that character's views. So, and that applies to any character and any situation, right? Now,
it applies to us for talking about and recommending the book. Doesn't mean we approve
please
of this.
don't come after us.
Last thing that this raised with me is I had a deja vu to you presenting The Stranger by Camus, which I think was written about the same time. And when you're describing the book basically as being quite a detached journey of this person, the adventure of this person, and to its ultimate demise, with an overlay of this is just things happening to him.
Mm-hmm.
It just immediately reminded me of The Stranger, who was just doing certain things. I think we were just debating why, but it was like from out of nihilism, realizing life is absurd, or just for the sense of feeling something or triggering other people's emotion towards him, if we were to hypothesize he was doing it in a provocative way. And I was wondering if that was kind of the spirit of the times in a way. Was that what people were preoccupied with, and was that what caught on as well? And because I think it was also published in France, so there are some overlaps.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right?
The Stranger is a existentialist novel. With Nabukov, I think it's psychological, which probably connects. Like, I'm not saying there's no overlap. I don't know. I haven't looked into that too much. I think, in the end of the day, The Stranger was a weird story, but no one got too upset about that. The Lolita is a story that divided a lot of people, and I think in many ways it united a lot of people, because there's very few things that unite us more than the shared hatred for pedophiles, right? So I mean,
like Trump.
Yeah, so it's like
for Trump.
You could write a story about a mass murderer that burned down buildings, and some people would be like, yeah, I get it, he had his motivations, everyone. There's some people that like Thanos from the Marvel stories, but if you write a story about a pedophile, no one will be like, yeah, I get it.
And that's really right. That's absolutely true. Like, it raises a question: what would a similar topic be in today's world? Are we edgier now, or actually more conservative than people in the 50s? Would you be able to write Lolita today and get away with it?
I think you wouldn't be able to. I do think we are more edgy. Like, there's definitely edgier stuff coming out, but I think the general tolerance, the mainstream tolerance for these books is much less.
Maybe things are happening at the edges, but they're just not in the mainstream. We're just not having the same debate.
Absolutely.
Because of this kind of polarization. So people cannot hold opposing thoughts in mind at the same time. Things that just blow up.
Absolutely. I think the closest you can get to this topic that's not pedophilia is probably cannibalism. So I'm thinking about like the Hannibal books, the Silence of the Lamb type of stuff that made cannibals pretty sympathetic, although they were absolutely the worst people. And I can't think of anything else that would tickle this outrage.
Yeah, you touch upon American Psycho, but it's not stuff. This is stuff from 10, 15, 20 years ago. Today, I think we've changed a lot in the last few years. It's quite interesting. I think. What are the books or movies that are truly edgy today? I can't think of anything that is.
There are a lot of like children's stories. Like, I quote children's stories, but like cartoons, like the South Parks and the Family Guys, and I think Smiling Friends is a recent one. There's the Big Mouth that's also dwells on these items.
Interesting, because what effectively you're saying is that the medium has changed a little bit, and actually we have more tolerance to animation. We can put up with a lot more, right? Rick and Morty, right, which is exploring a lot of dark themes, sometimes nihilistic. You can do pretty much anything in those virtual realities because it's a multiverse. anyway. It's a simulation, and you're allowed to explore a lot of ethical themes that you otherwise wouldn't be comfortable with.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's giving you it gives you that premise that allows you to take that risk. So it's still, it's still easy on you morally because it provides you with the excuse that this is not real, it's animation.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it even more valuable. The basically Lolita in this context is the courage to explore this avatar, this theme, where there's no excuse that the things are pretty real, and I guess it's doing a really tough job at making it as real as possible and then playing out this character. So that's where the value is.
Yeah, that kind of wraps up or sums up what my thinkings are.
That's cool. Well, thanks for sharing this one. This is my God, this is
it's a tough one.
I'm sure this will be very, very popular and will attract a lot of clicks. We'll have a good time with it.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Good choice.
We'll add a link to the video in case anyone is interested checking it out. It's an affiliate link that you can use to support us. Thank you so much, Russ. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think this was pretty cool, and I'm really interesting to hear your perspective on this. And I was wondering, maybe one last question was, why did you choose this book? I mean, you could have chosen a lot of other ones. What made you still linger on this? Why?
Excellent.
Why this one?
Total accident. Just no reasons whatsoever.
Pulled it from your bookshelf or mental bookshelf. And
funny thing that actually happened. We had Lolita as a book, and I just pulled it and I said, "Oh, I'll check it out." And I started reading it, and I said, "Oh, this is pretty
why not?"
But anyway, I'd recommend it because I think as a book it's pretty easy to read, and I wouldn't say it's entertaining, but it's an interesting topic.
It's an interesting thought exercise as well. Yeah.
All right.
Well, cool. Well, nice chatting to you.
Nice
and thanks, everyone. See you next time.
See you next time.